Welcome one and all to Elevenses Live with Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills Rider Training. It is not Wednesday the 11th. I thought I corrected that. It's Sunday the 11th of April. It's show number 129 and it's a fairly bright and sunny day at the moment here in London. So Clive's already logged in. Hello Clive, good morning to you, sir. What have we got for you today? We're a fairly packed show. Got a story, a woman who fell from a motorcycle in India after a COVID jab. The Northumbria Police and Crime Commissioner has proposed mandatory trackers for all motorcycles. March's UK bike sales are well down on those for 2020. The Trident, the Royal Enfield 650 and the Super Soco scooter all buck that negative trend. Ducati are looking at synthetic fuel. And an alternative set of Isle of Wight road races has been proposed for October. Meanwhile, over there on the island, a rider also fell off braking for a camera van. And we'll finish off with today's better biking tip, which is all about lines of sight and explaining why they're important. So settle yourself down, grab yourself a cuppa. Don't forget, if you have any questions, any comments, any feedback on the show, anything you'd like me to cover in a future episode, do feel free to drop me a line. I'll try and look in on some of those as we go along, but I may get back to them at the end of the show. So, right, okay, on with the first item. Just a reminder, basically, before we go any further, that we are back out on the road, myself and all other trainers. Let's get the right graphic up. I'm right now taking bookings at handy locations all around the M25. If conditions with COVID continue to improve, I might well be looking at doing some away days, as it were, to my other training areas, Oxford, even Wales, Devon, maybe even somewhere like the Peak District at some point later in the year. So if you're interested in something like that and you're a little bit further away from London than my normal locations allow, do drop me a line and I'll get back to you. Whilst I'm talking about the motorcycle training, don't forget bike training has already restarted on the 29th and motorcycle tests restart tomorrow, 12th of April. And that includes the Module 1 and the Module 2 tests. The car driving lessons will also be restarting, as will theory tests. Driving tests for cars don't restart though till April 22nd. But one thing I will say is that if you were hoping to get a motorcycle license this year and you've not already got something booked up, you could well be out of luck. The word is from bike trainers that they are already snowed under with catching up with the backlog from last year and the lockdown earlier this year, and waiting lists are growing by the day. They are limited in the number of tests that they can book with the DVSA. The DVSA are very unlikely, I would have thought, to open up new tests, as that would mean bringing in new examiners rather, and it would also flood test centres with candidates as well, which is something I'm absolutely certain they'll be trying desperately to avoid at this time. So yes, you may need to rethink your plans if you are hoping to get a motorcycle licence this year and aren't already on someone's waiting list. Right, Nigel has looked in and so have Sue, so good to see you both as well. Right, okay, so what else have we got to talk about then? Well, the first thing basically is that some bad news. The Times of India has reported the death of a woman, a 28-year-old woman. Now, what apparently happened is that she had a COVID jab, waited 30 minutes after receiving the vaccine, and then was travelling home on a motorcycle, which appears to have been ridden by her husband, and she passed out and she fell from the back of the bike. It seems that she was taken to a local hospital for first aid and then transferred to the Barmer Government Hospital, where she was declared dead. This incident happened in Rajasthan, which is up in the northwest of India, and a post-mortem is to be conducted into the cause of her death, and the local health department there has started a high-level investigation into the incident. So obviously sympathies with family and friends, but I do hope that this isn't directly related to the vaccine. There's enough negative news about that already at the moment. Another bit of sort of negative news. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Northumbria, Kim McGuinness, has suggested that all motorcycles should be fitted with trackers, so their whereabouts and speed can be monitored. Ms. McGuinness has proposed the idea to the police minister and said that the measure is to help tackle illegal and antisocial riding. And she says, "I don't mean our law-abiding bikers here. I'm talking about troublemakers, often young people riding unroadworthy bikes, which in some cases have been stolen." Well, not surprisingly, such a broad brush approach has come under immediate fire from motorcycle groups for its rather discriminatory and also intrusive nature. Now, whilst the technology is undoubtedly there to fit bikes with trackers, there'll be huge concerns, I would have thought, over just what use the police would make of such data if they could access it. It would all become all too easy for it to be diverted into roads policing purposes. So rather than just work out who's using these illegal bikes and track them down, I can see it being used to remotely police roads. And of course, if you're a law-abiding person, you probably wouldn't be very happy about this, but if you are a non-law abiding person, anything that's fitted to a bike can immediately be removed again. So I suspect that if you are one of the riders who is breaking the law and behaving antisocially, the first thing they would do would be to remove the tracker. So honestly, I think it's a bit of a daft idea. Another alternative, though, has come from the Mayor of Doncaster, Ros Jones, who's written to the Home Secretary with her ideas on tackling the antisocial behaviour problem related to off-road bikes and quads. In her letter, which is quoted in Motorcycle News, Jones talks about the frustrations felt by police when they have to hand back seized vehicles on payment of a fine, only to discover that they're used in another incident later on. So her system proposes that owners of non-road registered off-road vehicles would be required to declare the owner's reason for owning the machine and where they intend to use it before a license is issued. And the idea is therefore that those with genuine interests in using off-road machines, such as farmers, maybe the outdoor pursuit centres which use quad bikes, and motocross riders, people like that, they would be protected by this licensing system. But anyone who fails to take out a license for their vehicle or use it in breach of the conditions would have the vehicle seized and disposed of. Ms. Jones suggests if this scheme was adapted nationally, we feel it would be a great step forward in tackling a growing problem and removing access to vehicles being used to facilitate crime. Well, once again, I can see that there are going to be some issues with that. Many of these bikes don't have frame numbers. As far as I understand it, competition machines don't necessarily have the information that is needed to identify a bike. I'm stand to be corrected on that. And, again, the moment you start talking about conditions of use, what do you limit it to? There's always the risk, I suspect, of nailing those conditions down tighter and tighter. Right, okay. Don't forget, you can catch up with Elevenses on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 o'clock. It's currently, we're British summertime, aren't we? So remember to adjust your clocks if you are elsewhere in the world. Okay, so Motorcycle sales, January and February are traditionally pretty flat months for bike sales here in the UK, but we're now moving into the months when sales traditionally pick up. But to be honest, the registration figures for March, which came out just the other day, really don't look very good. There are huge decreases in just about every category over last March's numbers. Now, it is worth noting, of course, that for much of March last year, the UK wasn't in full lockdown. It only started towards the end of the month. Nevertheless, it is worth pointing out what has changed. The only group to show an increase at all are 50cc scooters, which are up just on 1.4% over last year. And I suspect that's largely the boom in food delivery, which has obviously taken place over the lockdown. Over 50cc scooters have also held up. Yamaha's NMAX actually tops the sales charts with 800 registered. The group that's taken the biggest hit, and again, perhaps isn't surprising, with continental holidays off the menu for at least the foreseeable future. Sport touring machines have collapsed. The sales have gone down from 500 last March to 209 this month. It's down almost 60%. The other success story are electrically powered scooters and motorcycles, which were up 151% in March. Now, obviously, the numbers are still relatively low, but it does show that there is increasing interest in buying not just smaller, cheaper electric scooters, but also full-sized electric motorcycles. I covered the use of a Zero for blood running a few shows ago. So things are beginning to change. Clive has just said he bought a Trident on Friday, due for pickup end of July. Lucky you, Clive, well done. Which actually brings me straight to my next item. What a link that was, eh? The machine that Clive's just mentioned, the Trident, has actually registered 306 models. Now, some of those will undoubtedly be demonstrators, but I suspect an awful lot are new bike sales. So that's good news for Triumph. The other machine which is maintaining surprisingly strong sales is the Royal Enfield Interceptor. 171 registered last month, and it's actually the top machine in the 126 to 650 bracket. I have to confess, I'm slightly surprised it's still shifting well. I expected a sort of an early run on the machine when it appeared. It had been sort of touted in the press for quite a while, and there will undoubtedly be people who wanted a sort of a modern classic, as it were, but it's been out now quite a while, so I suspect that it's not just those people who were waiting for it, but people are actually being converted by the positive reviews that particular machine's been getting. I actually have to say I quite like a ride on it myself to see what it's like. So where's the other winner? Amanda's just popped in and said her son has just bought a Trident, first one in Ireland. Well done to him. Congratulations. Thanks for that update, Amanda. Okay, so what are the other winners in the... Whoops, I just pressed the wrong button again. I need a producer to do all the button pressing for me. It's far too complicated talking and pressing buttons at the same time. Well, the other winner is the Super Soco CPX. There it is. Rather garish wall behind it, rather taking away from the bike itself, but you can see what it is. It's basically a scooter. And although for some reason it's appearing in the 0-50cc data class on the MCIA leaflet, the bike's actually a motorcycle in terms of license requirement. It needs the rider to be 17 and hold either a CBT or an 81 license. The machine's good for roughly 56 miles per hour, so that makes it more or less equivalent to a 100cc scooter rather than perhaps a 125, but the 4.8 kilowatt battery gives you a range of 44 miles with a 75 kilogram rider aboard. That's just under 12 stone, actually. So that's a fairly, that's a full-size adult. We're not talking about being ridden by a sort of a skinny teen here. If you double the battery with the dual battery option, not surprisingly, you also double the range, which goes up to 87 miles. And you can also do a full recharge of a single battery in between 3 and 4 hours using a standard 3-pin socket. You just need their charger. The other thing that's quite interesting about that bike is that it's actually got fairly big wheels for a scooter. That front's actually a 16-inch, and there's a 14-inch rear. And my limited experience of riding scooters is that the smaller the wheels are, the more horrid they are to ride. The bigger wheel ones basically tend to feel much more like a motorcycle, and obviously it aids the ride over the UK's potholed roads. No ABS, unfortunately, but it does have linked CBS system operating on the 2 discs, one front, one rear. You're probably wondering what the bottom line is. Well, it's a reasonable $3,599 for the single battery option. The dual battery does jump the price up by £1,100 though, which is a fair amount for a battery, but there we go. 2-year vehicle warranty, 3-year battery and motor. So that's the sort of thing that is starting to appeal more and more to commuters. Okay, what else? Well, Ducati have apparently been looking at synthetic fuel. Now, all the way back in February 2019, Pierluigi Zampieri, who's Ducati's head of innovation back then, was reported as saying that Ducati was intending to make an electric motorcycle and that there was one already in the pipeline, but it was a bike for tomorrow. Now, although that statement was made only just over 2 years ago, it does seem that the world's undergone something of a quantum shift in the last 12 months, and 2019, frankly, seems eons ago. Now, you probably recall, if you're a regular on the show, I've been saying for some time that Ducati and other manufacturers like Triumph and BMW, who tend to aim at the high end of the market, do have a bit of a problem. And that's a lack of an affordable entry-level bike to encourage new riders into the brand. BMW did tackle that with the 310 series a few years ago, and Triumph have obviously just launched the brand new Trident, which I wouldn't say is actually an entry-level model, but it's kind of mid-range. But when it comes to Ducati, their part spin special, the Monster, which rekindled the brand because of its not only attractive looks, but also its very, very attractive price tag, has long since climbed out of the budget market, which helped it sell by the truckload. So back in 2019, Zampieri said that being a company that's usually state-of-the-art, we could arrive with a product that's state-of-the-art or even better than all our competitors. The problem is now the right moment? It's a small market, and we're still trying to understand when it'll be ready for such an innovation as the electric motorcycle. Well, with the ground shifting far more rapidly than Ducati anticipated back in 2019, it seems they've now realized that the time is needed to do something to compete. And recent statements that are coming out of Italy, which is their biggest sales market, suggests that the big threat is not anymore the high-performing European manufacturers like Triumph, like BMW, like Moto Guzzi, like Aprilia, but emerging budget brands. And just recently, Francesco Milicia, Ducati's vice president of sales, was quoted in MCN saying, "In Italy, the market has changed a little bit as we have a lot of competition on price, but we don't want to go into competition with cheap manufacturers. We have to protect our brand. We have a brand that's been alive almost 100 years, and we have to respect that." Well, respect is one thing. Cutting your nose off to spite your face is another. He carries on by saying attracting younger customers is important, and for a product for young customers, this is something we're working on. Even with smaller displacements for young people, we can still build in the style, sophistication and performance of Ducati. So where is Ducati headed in a world moving far more rapidly than towards zero emissions than was likely anticipated just 2 years ago? Well, Milicia put the skids under the idea that electric bikes are the immediate answer. He said, "We're thinking and working on electric. We're part of a group that's going quickly towards electrification, and it's a good opportunity for Ducati." But then qualified that. "Will we produce an electric Ducati soon? No," he said. We think that for the kind of motorcycle we produce now, an electric motorcycle cannot guarantee the pleasure, range, weight that Ducati riders expect. So is that Ducati not being ready for an electric motorcycle, or is it the riders not being ready for the electric Ducati? My guess is that it's Ducati not being in a position to build one. I guess personally that they have probably invested far too much time and effort developing the V4 engine to replace the iconic and very long-lived V-twin. And I suspect they are struggling to jump technologies. Now, the original 851, you may remember, appeared all the way back in 1987, so it's almost a quarter of a century ago. And my guess is that Ducati's investment in that V4 engine was intended to be similarly long-term. And that would make sense in the context of Melisia's further statement, where he said that we are also looking carefully at other solutions for zero or minimal emissions, such as synthetic fuel. Other brands, such as Porsche, are looking at it, and it's something we're looking at in the medium term. So that would allow their V4 engine to carry on. It would allow for a net zero emissions approach whilst keeping their investment intact for some years to come. However, that doesn't mean that Ducati are not into electric motorcycles at all. Have a look at this little scooter here. I'll just put it up big screen, get it as big as I can. If you zoom in on the front of the bike, let's see if I can, I don't know if this will work. I'll try it. Oh, yes, there it goes. Can you see top corner there, Super Soco? Does that give you an idea who has brought this Ducati to the world? Well, it's my suspicion this is how Ducati plans to ride out the changes. Rather than compete head-on with companies like Super Soco, it suggests that they want to bring those bikes to Ducati as badged-up models. This is the 30 mile per hour, 40 mile range e-scooter, and whilst the performance isn't lightning, just 30 miles an hour and 40 mile per hour range, 40 mile range, the price is a bargain, 2,495. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see some small Ducati motorcycles appearing as Super Soco are creating a growing range of electrically powered street bikes. So keep an eye on that and see what happens. That's my guess anyway. Okay, so don't forget, you can support me if you've enjoyed the show by heading over to my Ko-fi page. I have just finished putting up the entire 100 old articles from 2017, my old Facebook page. So many of those are subscriber reading. You can access that for £3 a month. But if you want to, you can also have a look and see there are half a dozen or more free to read items in there, just to see whether or not you think it's worth the money. And I hope you think it is worth the cash. £3 a month is less than half the price of a subscription to Motorcycle News. And frankly, I think you get far better value out of my Ko-fi page, but there we go, that's my opinion. Right, what's been going on else outside in the UK? Well, if you head over to the Isle of Wight, you may recall that they had what were called the Diamond races proposed to take place at the end of this year in October. But of course, with COVID hitting the headlines, those races were rapidly cancelled. And since then, nothing has actually been heard from the organisers. The event was supposedly going to go ahead in October this year, but there's been a deafening silence from the organisers. The protests from locals, however, who'd be affected by that racing and the closed roads were distinctly audible. So was I left reeling by the cancellation, as MCN said? Well, no, I wasn't really surprised. I honestly didn't think that there was much chance of getting these races up and running in a year. But what I missed was that the just a day or so after the second, the cancellation of these races, there was a second announcement, and that was to the effect that an entirely different motorcycle event was being planned for the island, the Isle of Wight road races. But anyway, nothing had been heard from them either, apparently, until just this week, when On the Wight, which is an officially regulated, independently owned media organisation, fired up a story saying that they had got hold of a briefing paper, which was apparently doing the rounds behind the scenes. So what they dug out was some information on these races. And let me just share that picture with you. That is a sort of a mock-up of what appears to be a ticket to the race. What they found was that James Kay, who was the man behind the diamond races, is also behind the Isle of Wight road races. The so-called primary producers of the event have been named as Josie and Rob DeBank. Rob DeBank, you've got to be kidding me. I just got that. Oh dear. I hope that really is his name. Anyway, they are the team behind the Bestival Festival that you might have heard of. It was a 3-day event that was held on the Isle of Wight till 2016. It ran for 12 or 13 years over there. It moved to Dorset in 2017. And as you can see from that ticket mock-up, the Isle of Wight road races are planned to go ahead in October this year, over the half-term holiday. The event itself would be organised by the ACU. They are the governing body for motorcycle sport in Great Britain. Gary Thompson, MBE, BEM, is from the ACU, and he's expected to be clerk of the course, as he was so named for the diamond races. The organisers say that there will be 3 days of practice, with a final day including qualifying, plus 1 day of racing, which would be Saturday the 23rd. And the course is 8.24 miles long and runs through the villages of Compton, Freshwater, Brook and Chessel. The roads would be closed between 10:30 and 5 each day, and discussions are being held with the local bus company Southern Vectis about diversions to two affected routes. A letter has been sent out to all parish councils affected by the proposals by the organisers, explaining their intentions, and they say that they will begin consultation with residents. Now, the very latest developments, which literally just happened in the last day or two, is that the Isle of Wight Council have now confirmed that they have provided in principle agreements, but the Safety Advisory Group has not yet met to discuss the plan. So from the council minutes, they say the diamond race event is still ongoing, but have to secure funding, so date is questionable. The other shorter event over at West Wight now has local parties involved, namely Tapnell Farm and Rob DeBank. This is looking a more family-oriented event. The event is still on target to run October 2021. The national body is coming to the island at the end of the month to look at the route. It still requires consent from the Safety Advisory Council and Secretary of State. There are mixed views from local residents. I dare say there are. So, right, okay, what's Tapnell Farm? Well, I had a look. It turns out to be a tourist attraction in Yarmouth on the island. It's a farm-themed amusement park with a petting zoo, go-kart rides, sledge slides and play areas. But it also offers accommodation, eco-pods, wood cabins, safari tents, modulogs, whatever they are, meadow domes, no idea what they are either, and farm cottages. I have a fair idea what that is. And they have a restaurant and bar on site that's open 27 days a week. There's also an aqua park on the same site, but it's separately owned. Okay, so one of the big differences between the Isle of Wight road race and the diamond races is that the latter was due to be a time trial, i.e. the riders set off individually like at the TT, and the fastest one round the track wins. The Isle of Wight road race is hoping for an actual road race where the competitors start at the same time, with around 10 to 15 competitors for each race. They hope to attract 10,000 spectators in the first year, but obviously some residents of West Wight believe that the disruption would be significant because, amongst other things, they would need to remove all street furniture along the course. That means road signs and cat signs, as well as any barriers, would have to go. And I dare say there would also need to be some work done to sort of make some safety for street lighting, telegraph poles, that kind of thing, if there are any on the route. So will it happen? That'll be the million-dollar question. Well, given that no less than 7 Isle of Wight summer carnivals have already been cancelled for this summer, I would personally put the chances of getting this event organised as slim to thin. Right, so anything else to talk about on the Isle of Wight? Well, actually, there is. Not good to have a link, isn't there? That's a camera van and a motorcycle parked next to it, and the event is linked. The rider apparently lost control of his bike after braking hard, having spotted the police camera van there. And the other photos of the impact show there were skid marks and marks where the bike hit the curb. The incident required the attendance of police, paramedics and a fire appliance, and it closed a stretch of busy road connecting Fishbourne and Binstead. The fire crew were there to clear up the fuel spill, by the way. As the incident occurred in full view of the police speed camera van in the lay-by, I suspect the outcome for the male rider in that VTR motorcycle there isn't likely to be a slap on the wrist. So, okay, that's today's news. Andy Farhall has just put up a Wikipedia link to rob the bank. I'm still giggling over that name. It's cracking me up. And Amanda also said she's a Royal Enfield and vintage Vespa girl herself. Right, okay, I'll try to keep my giggles under control while I move on to the serious bit. Just before I go on to my better biking tip, which will be on Lions' site today, I'll just give you a link to this MCN page. It's about getting back on the bike after lockdown. As you probably remember, it's something I've been talking about over the last few weeks, and quite honestly, there's a lot of fairly good advice in that article. It's one of the better ones, and much of it mirrors what I've been saying here and in other shows as well. So, okay, on to the final event of the day. Now, when I was a CBT and direct access instructor, one of my favourite, so I can get, oh, come on. There we go. One of my favourite teaching aids was this Early Learning Centre playmat. I've still got it, and back in 2019, I used some photos from it to introduce some scenarios, and I'm going to cover the same ones on Elevenses for the next few weeks. So, you probably know from my work on Science of Being Seen that one of my particular interests, ever since I became a bike instructor actually, has been why we're still having collisions between cars and motorcycles at junctions. After all, we've had decades and decades of safety campaigns trying to prevent them. So as riders, the first job is that we have to be aware that these crashes happen. And then our second job is to actually look for the locations. Well, have a look at the picture. There we go. There is a typical junction on the near side. That's the favourite place for motorcycle crashes to happen in a built-up area, and it's also a place where a significant number happen out of town on faster roads. There are two crashes at these junctions, generally speaking. There's the one where the vehicle turns out, but there's also one where a vehicle turns in. Now, as you can see from the diagram there, it's not going to happen on that one because it's a one-way street. But let's have a think about what we can discern and how we can become aware of these junctions. Well, the first thing is we have to look for them. We have to know that they are there. So what clues will I be looking for? Well, if there's a road sign, it's blindingly obvious that there is a junction in front of us. Problem, everybody learns road signs and what they mean. They learn them for the theory test, and then equally quickly forget them. Rarely do riders respond to these on the road, but they're there to give us early warning, and they give us useful information, because those plain triangular hazard warning signs tell us that other people have had accidents at this particular location in the past. They're usually serious, often fatal, and almost inevitably they are repeated, which is why the sign goes up in the first place. So that alone should be enough to warn us about the situation ahead, even before we read what the hazard is on the sign. Of course, if you haven't got a sign, it doesn't mean that the junction isn't dodgy, but if there is a sign, it definitely means we should be looking for it. Okay, what else can we look for? We can look for a finger post. These are the old style sort of pointing signs. They used to be actually literally in the shape of a pointing arm, because those are actually located exactly where the junction is. They point into it. That's why they're called finger posts. So having seen the early warning from the triangular sign, the finger post tells us exactly where the hazard we're looking for actually is. Have a look at the way the junction has been engineered. The curb curves into the junction. That's a good clue that there's a side turning there. Look for street lighting. If there's no street lighting on the rest of the road and suddenly one street light over the top of your junction, anticipate there have been problems with people seeing that junction at night. Look for crosshatched areas in the middle of the road, because those are refuges for vehicles turning right, and that implies that there probably will be quite a lot of traffic moving in and out of that junction, enough to cause a queue and hold up traffic on the road if there wasn't that right turn refuge. Look for bollards and traffic islands. They're there to help protect that refuge, but also may help pedestrians cross the road at that location as well. Something else to think about. Have a look at the white paint. You should see the white line down the middle, probably gets longer and turns into a hazard line, but you can also usually see the give way line painted across the end of the road. You can see it in the playmat picture here, the double dashed lines. What if it is a solid line? Well, that usually tells you that as the drivers have to stop, the implication is that they probably can't see clearly before they get to the end of that road. So that's the idea, is to bring them to a complete halt and to look at the end of the road rather than before they get there. So anticipate that drivers pulling out will have a restricted view. Anything else to think about? Well, it can be difficult to see a turning in a built-up area in the first place. So look for two other clues. Gaps between buildings. If there's a break in a line of roofs, there is an opening of some sort. It could be anything from a driveway to a house, right up to an opening to sort of an access to a factory or something that's behind the houses, or it could be a side turning. Big gaps between lines of parked cars as well is another very good clue. And of course, once you see vehicles turning in and out, it really shouldn't be a surprise if you find one turning in front of you. But it's amazing how many people are caught out by that. So, okay. The problem is that what we're doing here is we're using just one half of a line of sight. What I'm talking about with a line of sight is that we can see from where we are, we can see in one direction. But what about the view from the opposite direction? Because we have to see a hazard to be aware of what's coming, but other drivers have to see us to be aware that we're there and to add them into their own riding plan. Now, if you look at that junction on the playmat there, I'll just bring it up to a slightly bigger size again. What's the first thing that I noticed? Well, there's a building on the left and there's a big sign saying T's and Ices, which is blocking the driver's view out of the junction. So my line of sight to the junction itself may not be too bad. I may see the front of that car, but will the driver who's sitting some distance behind the front of his car actually see me approaching? Next time you're out and about, have a look at the number of badly placed advertising signs that block views for emerging drivers. And they're not just advertising signs as well. There's one sign on a bit of road I know, which is actually an official sign. It's a tourist attraction sign, and it's placed at exactly the right height to block the view of a transit van driver. A car driver can see under it. Transit van driver is right in their line of sight. What about hedges, trees? There's some little shrubs on the grass there. They're all there on that corner, all these obstructions. If there's pedestrians, will they be blocking the line of sight of the driver? What's our response? Well, the first thing is that we need to understand just how important a line of sight is. It turns out that around 1 in 5 of all junction collisions, the bike was hidden in the run up to the crash. The driver, in other words, looked, but the bike could not be seen. And frankly, if you have all the day riding lights on in the world on your bike, if you're wearing the brightest possible riding kit, it absolutely makes no difference if the driver cannot see where you are. So what can we do about getting into a better position? Well, if there's nothing ahead of me, then is there anything to stop me moving out further towards the center line and trying to open up that line of sight, trying to change the angles? Well, probably not. I just have to be a bit cautious about getting too close to any oncoming vehicles. But if the road is completely empty, I can get right out to the center line. And in fact, there is at least one junction on a very, very high speed straight bit of road where at 60 miles an hour, there's nothing on the other side of the road at all. And if there's nothing coming the other way, I'll actually cross the center line to get away from a little country lane, because the hedges are right up to the edge of the road, and the only way the driver can see anything is to put a chunk of his car in the road. So I actually get right over to the other side of the road to get past that one. So think about opening up the angles so that the driver has a better line of sight. But what if we're following a truck or a bus? Quite likely on a street like the one we're looking at there, isn't it? Well, the answer is to move to the left and open up the line of sight down the inside of the vehicle, and also to keep well back, because if we're close, remember, we make it even more difficult for people to see us. So drop back, move a bit back to the left, and you'll be opening up that line of sight down the inside of the vehicle. So see and be seen. It's one of the very first concepts we cover in the theory bit of CBT, but it's something that a lot of riders really do forget. They expect to be seen, but they don't give the driver any help to see them. So think about how you can establish a line of sight and see hazards for yourself, but also try to ensure that anybody looking for you also has a line of sight. And then think about slowing down as well, because that gives you more time to do your emergency maneuvers if things do get tricky. Right, okay, that's it for today. That's the end of today's webcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found that last little section interesting. If you want to find out more about the way I think about biking, you can head over to my 60-second safety selection of videos on YouTube. What else was I going to say? Don't forget the tips on Tuesday and skills on Saturday posts are now dual posted on Coffee, and there's the email that you can also follow if you want a direct alert to new posts on Facebook. That's it for today. Stay safe out there. Sue's just said thank you. You're welcome, Sue. Enjoy the weather if you're going out on the bike. Today it will be chilly, so wrap up warm. Right, hopefully see you back on Wednesday for the next edition of Elevenses. So from Kevin Williams, it's bye for now.